In this lesson, I'm going to show you one of GIMP's most powerful tools, layer masks. A layer mask will let you dynamically and effectively choose what portion of a layer is visible and what portion of a layer is not visible. This is done by using an image that runs parallel to a specific layer. And you'll see what I mean in the video tutorial here. And if you like any of the images that you see here, check out the description area below and I will have a link to all of the tutorials to these images. Alright, before I actually show you layer masks, I'm going to show you a little bit of what the eraser tool would do in this case, and hopefully this will clearly explain the benefits of using a layer mask instead of using an eraser. So if I start to erase on this blue layer, you'll see that it pretty much just makes that portion transparent. It erases that blue away. So if I hide my blue layer, you'll clearly see that the green layer is still underneath and it is visible because I'm erasing the portions of the blue layer. Now, the problem with this is if let's say I wanted to change the color of that blue to red. Now, you could go into the colors, hue, saturation, and change it like that, but what if I wanted to do it with a bucket tool? What if I knew the exact color that I needed? Well, it would be a little bit of a challenge to effectively get that done, because if I click on my bucket tool and I fill, it's not going to fill what I want. It's just going to try to either fill in the whole thing or it'll fill the similar colors, and you can see it's just not giving us the result we want. We get that blue edge, it just doesn't work out. Now, if you take a layer mask and do this, it'll create a completely different result. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hide this layer for now and create a new layer and fill it up with that same color blue, just to show you what happens. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to right click on this blue layer and we're going to add a layer mask. Now, the layer mask will ask me how I want to initialize the layer. There's plenty of different ways to do this, but for now we're just going to leave it on white full opacity and click add. Now you'll see that we have two images here. We have the blue image, which is our layer, and the white image here, which is our layer mask. Now the layer mask, like I said earlier, is nothing more than an image that runs parallel to a specific layer. In this case, it's going to be this layer right here. Now, if I right click on this layer and I click Show Layer Mask, what you're going to see is you're going to get a clear look at what our layer mask looks like. Right now, it's nothing more than a white image. Now, if I click on my paintbrush tool and I start painting black on this, it's just going to look like a black on white image. Now, if I also go ahead and let's paint halfway through. Let's paint gray. Let's add some gray pixels in there too. And then I right click on this layer mask and I uncheck the show layer mask option. What you're going to see is all of these black pixels are going to turn green, and all of these gray pixels are going to turn some kind of green and blue mix, and the white is going to stay blue. Okay, and just like I said, that's what happened. Now, what's actually going on here is the black represents transparency, the white represents opacity, and the gray represents a mix of the two. Essentially, this is emulating the eraser tool, and it's doing a lot of the same things as the eraser tool. The only difference is our original image is untouched. If I right click on this layer mask and I check the disable layer mask, what you'll see is our layer itself is still blue. It's still the same, it's still unchanged, and we can edit it however we want, but no matter what we do to that layer, whenever this layer mask is active, all of those transparencies and things like that are going to still be there. Okay, now that you've seen the layer masks and a little bit on how they work, I'm going to show you why it's so much easier to work with these instead of the eraser tool. Okay, so first off, let's go ahead and try to add a gradient to this blue layer. Okay, with the layer mask still active and everything turned on and normal, let's try adding this fire incandescent gradient and see what happens. How about that? It creates that gradient and it still keeps all of that transparency data like I had said earlier. So if I hide this green layer, you'll see that those checkerboard parts are transparent, and that's being directly affected by my layer mask. If I were to click on my paintbrush tool, click on my layer mask, and then start brushing the color black, you'll see it's just going to add more transparency to my image. And alternatively, if I switch over to the color white and I start coloring white, it's going to remove that transparency. Now, let's try to do the same thing with the eraser tool version of this. Let's click on our gradient and try to create that gradient. You see what it did? It just wiped out all of that transparency data and it's all gone. Whereas on here, I can make gradients all day. It doesn't matter. It'll always stay there. Now, the cool thing about layer mask is you can also add gradients and do all kinds of stuff to these images. So, for example, let's add another new layer. And this time we're going to hide our layer mask again. And we're going to fill this layer with that color blue. And now I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a layer mask. I'm going to set it to white full opacity again and click add. Now I'm going to reset my colors to black on white and click on my blend tool, set my gradient to foreground to background, and make sure I'm clicking on my layer mask so that I'm editing it, not my layer. And I'm just going to create this gradient. And you'll see that it created a blue to green looking gradient from these two layers because it added that transparency information. This is incredibly powerful because now instead of having to create a custom gradient or anything like that, I can simply just change the color, this color blue, and whenever I change that color blue, it's just going to change to whatever color I want it to be. So I don't like that red on green gradient, I can make it an orange on green gradient. It's so much easier than trying to edit and create your own custom gradients. A very good example of where layer masks really came in handy for me is for the tutorial for my product photography using GIMP. I'll go ahead and link to the complete tutorial for this image below. Check it out if you haven't already, but I figured I would go ahead and touch base on this and show you a little bit of exactly where layer masks came in so handy here. First off, let's look at this part right here. So this layer is, let's hide all the extra layers. Okay, so this layer here is nothing more than a duplicate of my base. This is my base layer, and here's the duplicate layer. Now the thing is, the duplicate layer, the only part that you can actually see is a very small portion of it because of my layer mask. I disabled my layer mask here, and now you can see this is the original version of this image. So here are the two images that I'm using to combine together. I wanted to get the black background of this image, but I wanted to get the light foreground objects, the box and the labels and things like that from this image. So I had to use layer masks to get that done. I could have, tried to brush in the color black and use select tools to, select stuff and delete stuff and do stuff like that, but it gets very messy, and if you make a mistake, it's really hard to fix it. Whereas with layer masks, you're never actually deleting anything, you're just adding more information, which that information you can always easily remove at a later point. So let's go ahead and re-enable that layer mask, and let's also just show you the layer mask itself. You'll see it's nothing more than, it's pretty fuzzy. I just used a fuzzy brush at different shades of gray, black, and white, and I just brushed in the areas that I wanted to be visible. And as you can see, all of this black area is completely unchanged, and it shows the layer underneath, which is my original version. So you can see with the combination of the two, I was able to effectively remove all of that extra stuff that I didn't want. Here's another tutorial that I've already done in the past. Again, I'm going to go ahead and link this logo tutorial below, but I wanted to point out again the value of layer masks in this image. If I right click on this layer mask here, on this layer, which is nothing more than the little Android dude's body, if I right click on that and I click show layer mask, what you're going to see is it's actually, this time, it's a completely black on completely white layer mask. So the image itself should be completely that bright colored green. But he's not, because instead of making that odd color of gray, I just went ahead and stuck with white, and I just adjusted the opacity here because that gives me a nice dynamic and easy way to modify how visible or non-visible that portion of the image is. Now, back to the Android logo portion, another thing to note is you'll notice that he is the layer mask. His shape is a layer mask, not the image itself. The image itself is nothing more than a green, just a complete rectangular green object. Now if I right click on that and I undisable the layer mask, you'll see that my layer mask is defining my edge. And since he's a single colored object, this is really easy to do. And actually, if you look and watch that tutorial, you'll see a lot of how this layer mask made this result look so much nicer, because before there was a nasty white edge along it and stuff like that. Just check out that tutorial and you'll really see some of the power behind layer masks. Okay, so now that you have seen a couple more examples of where layer masks really come in handy, let's go ahead and take a quick second to see what happens whenever you try initializing that layer mask in a different way. Let's right click on this background layer and let's add a new layer. Or actually, let's just duplicate the layer. And we're going to go ahead and hide our background for now. And I'm going to right click on this layer and I'm going to click Add Layer Mask. Now, there's white full opacity, which you've already seen. It just essentially makes your entire layer mask white. Black full transparency does the opposite. It will make your entire layer black. Or in other words, it's going to make everything on that layer disappear until you start brushing in white. Layers alpha channel, that works with, well, I'll just click and show you. In this case, there's no alpha channel on this image, so it just made the whole thing transparent. It's not really something I use very often. Usually if I do anything, I'll use white full transparency, black full transparency. Sometimes I'll use selection or grayscale copy of layer. What selection will do is if you click on your selection tool, and let's say you have this, really nice complicated selection, or you actually took the paths tool, and you traced out a specific object, and you want to isolate that object in GIMP. Well, with the paths tool, you can trace your path, and then in your path you can click path to selection, and that'll turn your path into a selection. And with that, you can then right click and click Add Layer Mask, and you can set it to selection, and what's going to happen is everything is going to disappear except for your selection. So now if you click on your paintbrush tool, you're able to still change your layer mask. If you look at your layer mask, it's just a white, it just took your selection and made it white and filled the rest with black. If you brush over here white, it's going to make that portion of the image visible again. Or alternatively, as always, if you paint black, it's going to make it all go away. So let's go ahead and duplicate that layer. We're going to delete its layer mask that we have, so we're able to put a new one in. Let's make it visible, right click, add another layer mask, and this time we're going to do grayscale copy of layer. This is a pretty cool tool. It's often overlooked, and the capabilities of it are through the roof, really. Usually I use this to effectively isolate a specific object from a background. Specifically, if you look at the beginning of my zombie tutorial, I'll link to that too. There's a video at the beginning of that that shows you how the grayscale copy of layer comes into play. So as you can see here, what it did was, if I right click and I show my layer mask again, all it did was it took my image, made it black and white, and popped it on my layer mask. So if you have an image that's black on white, or you want to highlight only the light pixels, and you want to make the black pixels disappear on your image, you can do that. So now if I were to, let's unshow my layer mask, and let's go ahead and delete everything on my actual layer and just fill it with the color black. And as you can see, it creates a pretty weird effect. but I'm going to show you a little bit more in a second. Alright, so now I've got this odd looking black type effect on this image, and the rest of it's just transparent. Now, what's going on here is if I show my layer mask again, you're going to see that there's a bunch of black pixels on this. So the majority of this image is invisible because a majority of this image is dark. The only parts that are clearly visible are parts of the waterfall where it's white and the sky where it's overexposed and white. So if I right click on this and I uncheck my show layer mask again, you're going to see the very clear black pixels there because my layer is black. If I were to fill this with a different color like blue, oops, I colored my layer mask. That's why you got to make sure that you always click on your layer before that. And you'll see all the blue pixels are representative of any color that isn't completely black in the image. Now here's a cool thing though. If I right click and I show my layer mask again, you can edit this with all of those exposure tools that you've learned about in the past. So if you clicked colors, invert, it's going to make this look pretty wicked. But the thing is, if I right click on this and I uncheck my show layer mask, it's going to make most of my image in color now because I effectively inverted the image and I'm inverting what's visible and what's not visible. And you can also click colors, curves, you can darken this, you can lighten it, you can do whatever you want to create that result that you want. The use of this, like I said, is very expansive. For the most part, I use this to remove specific parts of an image that are really overexposed or something like that. I also use this a lot on, as I said before, removing a person, including hair. This is really nice to get hair out of an image because you can do the colors, curves tool and stuff like that, and it will make the hair darker and the background lighter, which would effectively pull that information out. Again, I would show you that, but I've already shown that before on my zombie tutorial, so I just went ahead and linked that below. This lesson could go on forever. I could literally sit here and explain to you all of the different wonderful ways that a layer mask can effectively isolate a portion of an image for you. But for the purpose of this lesson, I wanted to simply explain to you how they work. That way, whenever you see them again in my later tutorials, you'll have an understanding on what's going on, why I did that, and how it's doing it. I hope this helps, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave comments in the comment section below. And also, take a minute to subscribe to my newsletter. Signing up is going to give you 5 exclusive lessons, a free ebook by me, and I will also email you periodically asking to see how you're doing with GIMP, what your problems are, and it'll give you a direct communication between you and me to talk about your projects with GIMP, how things are going, what you're struggling with, and whatnot.